Hi, and welcome back to another Typings video. I'm your host and DM, Tom, and I'm joined with Zarayu,
How's it going?
Brigadoon,
Hello.
Chris,
Hello.
Vilty,
Hi.
and of course my trusty personal assistant, Denise, aka Jordan.
Oh, hi there.
Oh, hi there. Alright, so we're going to be covering dragon types, ice types, and fighting types today. So this should be a very interesting, at least to me, video. We're going to start off strong here because, well, be completely honest, I'm sure if anybody has any interest in this, it'll have to be in dragons. Now, we've only got two people that can really speak prominent on dragons. That will be, of course, Zarayu, who is secondary dragon typing, and Brigadoon. Now, Brigadoon's dragon typing is neither primary nor secondary, but he's had a lot of experience with dragons, which is why we're bringing him into this conversation so we can have a nice converse about them. So a little background about dragon typings before we get into the meat of it. No pun intended. Dragon types can be very bestial creatures. As you would expect, a dragon is a dragon. Now, when it comes to a dragon type, you can assume a couple things about them. One, they're gonna be apex predators. I mean, the same way you assume a dragon to be the apex of power, at least in most myths. Same thing in Pokemon. Look at the typings and look at the raw stats of these Pokemon. They have incredible power. They have incredibly strong moves, and, with not counting Gen 6, they only had two weaknesses. How can you even compare to that? One of the weaknesses being themselves, out of all things. Of course, if you're going to take down an apex predator, you need an apex predator to do so. Dragons, there you go. Now, dragon-type personalities can be very straightforward, very brutal, very in-your-face. I'm a dragon-type trainer. I caught this dragon with my bare hands. You know why? Because how can I expect that dragon to respect me if I have to rely on my Pokemon just to catch it? Which seems kind of crazy, which is the truth of it. But look at the way dragon-type trainers have been through the anime. You have villages of people who have been training to be dragon-type trainers since they were young. You have dragon-type gym leaders that are these noble people who are trying their best to be, the epitome of the apex human. And so you look at that, you understand it, we move on from it and go, how does this affect the other typings? How does this interact within the world outside of I'm on a mountain training underneath a waterfall, I'm out in the forest, I've got this apex predator, obviously it's going to act like an apex predator. How does this affect the real world? Well, if you're going to control the dragon type, you're going to have to be the alpha dragon, right? That's just the truth of it. How can you expect that apex predator to follow you or even believe you if you're not going to assert your dominance? Now, how you do that depends on a lot of different things. That depends on the dragon type itself. That depends on whether or not that dragon is a child when you get it. When a child, I mean tier 1, because dragons usually have a very extended evolutionary process. They usually evolve at moderately large level gaps. So you can expect that their life expectancy would be high, along with the fact that probably their maturity is as much part of their evolution as the evolutions and the lifestyle itself. Alright, so that's really as much background as you really need when it comes to a dragon, which is why I've got to bring up Zarayu here. Now, Zarayu, once again, you're not in the main recording D&D, but in the one we make privately here on the TeamSpeak, you have two dragon types, three actually, in your party. You have a crocodile, which is a custom Pokemon. It's a water dragon giant crocodile. You have an Axew. That's obviously everybody should know what an Axew is. And you have a Seaweed, which is once again another custom Pokemon, which is another water dragon that looks a lot like a baby Nessie. When it comes to your experiences and things like that, I mean, you've done pretty good with these dragon type Pokemon. I'm not gonna lie. Explain to me how you're doing it. What are you thinking when you're doing it? Where are you going with this thought process? I mean, talk to me here.
Now, when I'm dealing with them, it's like, it depends on what stages I'm dealing with them. If they're already in my party, it's like dealing with a friend. It's somebody who's on equal with you, they're gonna do their thing, you're gonna do your thing, but you got to meet in the middle somewhere. But like with Crocodile, when he first evolved from a dragon scale, like I fed him a dragon scale in a situation, and he force evolved.
What did he evolve from again?
He was a Crocodile, but he was a more bestial Crocodile.
All right.
I actually had to wrestle him into submission.
Well, I mean, that's that example. If you're gonna be the alpha dragon, you've got to be an alpha somehow. And I mean, wrestling a water dragon to the ground is a pretty good way of doing it, honestly.
But I approach most of it as being a friend to them, not like I'm your trainer, you're my Pokemon, you do what I say. It's like I'll let him go hunt if he needs to go eat, or I mean, there's been mistakes along the way, and I'm slowly still learning. So,
I mean, life is a class, as Joe Dirt once said. You just gotta dig it. All right. Now that being said, now Brigadoon, you've trained actually a lot of dragons now that I think about it, and you've had quite a few powerful ones. You're the only person in the campaign to have ever actually had a Hydreigon, or Hydreigon rather, and had it obey him. You've had quite a few fake Pokemon that were dragon based, going from a fire dragon, a fire steel dragon, because of course we have tri-typings in this world, why not? You've had an electric dragon, and when we last left off in that same campaign, you were in the process of trying to get a grass dragon.
Yeah, that was still a very interesting ordeal.
Exactly. So, from with all your experiences, I mean, and you seem to have a plethora of them. What type of things can you enlighten a listener into? What type of mysteries can you uncloak for us today? And I mean, Zariah, you go ahead and you pipe in too if you can think of anything that you might agree or disagree with.
I guess with my experience, over the course, I mean, I've played the Pokemon games since I can remember. Played the original Blue, Red, Yellow, all the way up to Gen 6 with our X and Y games. And Dragons have been my favorite, so that's the reason why I constantly seek them out, constantly want to try and understand them. And the more that I've actually interacted within your worlds, is I've come to find out that it's capable of finding dragons that match your personality, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a dragon type trainer that I've come to realize. And the more I've learned about them, the more that I've studied them, you can kind of classify them into 4 major categories, 2 of them which compare together. You got your squatters, and then you got your roamers, and then they divide into bestial or sentient. Obviously, they're all fierce and powerful, but some are more in the sense of I hunt because I'm a bloodthirsty, dragon, versus you're more sentient like your Dragonites, which have the intelligence to make moral decisions and things like that. And so understanding that, it was allowing me to find partners, and that's the only reason why I was able to have a Hydreigon that actually could listen to me, because I found a very specific one that had a very different mood than most. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to have it as a friend. And you're right with the fact that dragons want an equal partner. They're not looking for somebody to tell them what to do. They're not looking for somebody that they have to constantly protect. They want one of the herd, one of the pack. They want to fight alongside you and know that you're gonna be okay by yourself. It's just kind of that relationship, and their bond that you create with that is really amazing, because not only do you train with them, but you fight in combat. It's the same way that you would have our military, that brothers in arms. It's literally that bond that you're developing with them. It's like, you are an equal with me. I'm going to the umpteenth degree to be with you, and it's a really amazing experience. That's why I like to experience having dragons with me. But unfortunately, my personality is very different from an actual dragon. Dragons tend to be more arrogant, which I don't like to say I'm not, but I think I'm not as a dragon type in that regard. Pretty much is all I can really comment on at the moment. I think it's on my head. Zrio, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, another thing I'd like to add to the whole mix of everything is another little quirk about dragons is they do also show mercy in certain situations. They're
Oh
not
yeah.
all apex super predators who are always out, like, if there's like, say they come among like a big pack of like grass types and they're just doing their thing, but the dragon's not hungry, they're not going to go out of their way to harm that community. They'll probably just go around and be like, okay.
But is that really mercy? Is something
Well,
I'd
I mean,
position to you.
well, there was a situation I was in where I had injured an Ariados, and I came upon that same Ariados, and my Axu had been injured by that Ariados, and I had not realized that until this point. And I had to stifle my own rage, and because I saw it had babies around it, and I decided to just turn around and walk away instead of, enacting on my urge to want to fight it.
Of course, of course. No, I can understand that. Something I'd probably also throw in there is that there are two categories in which most dragons fit into. And when I say two categories, it's either one of these two options, and there are two sets in each option, all right? So you have squatters and you have wanderers, and you have your bestial and you have your sentient. And between those two options, any mixture of those two forming together can really define about any dragon. I mean, you've got your wandering sentience, which can be a lot like a dragon knight, and then you have this is a good example of a squatter would be like a Flygon. A Flygon is actually pretty bestial when you start to think about it. They're the sandstorm Pokemon. They fly around. They're not squatting in a very small area, but they're squatting in that desert and a certain aspect of that desert nonetheless. So you've got your squatting bestial, you have your wandering sentient. Within that understanding, you can kind of go, okay, that dragon you're looking at is going to fit one of these points in these two categories. And when you think about that, you probably have a better way of dealing with it. Now, catching dragon Pokemon can be much more different, as we were talking about earlier, than catching normal Pokemon. Every type of Pokemon has its own unique way to be caught. The best way, can be wildly different from maybe sitting down and having a nice conversation, being like, listen here, coming with me is the safer option. I can be your friend. I can provide for you. I want the best, and I'd love to have you with me. Going all the way to the opposite end, which is fighting it into submission and saying, hey, I am stronger, I'm faster, I am better, and if I'm like this and there are people I'm afraid of in this world, what makes you think you can't survive? You should come with me. I mean, there's wildly different ways of approaching it. But between you two, what do you think would be the best way of catching a Pokemon? At least a dragon Pokemon.
Well, in my experience, you have to be willing to have an open mind. I found out that you get your own style as a trainer. You definitely have your own way of doing things. Mine is usually throw a punch first, ask questions later. That's just kind of how my philosophy. But I like to go on with open mind. And if it looks like I can communicate first, or try to do some sort of a challenge with them that is equal. Like for example, last Pokemon I was going for was a Grass Dragon. Pokemon are very patient Pokemon. They like to, this particular one liked to stalk its prey, and so I challenged it to a sitting contest, which sounds silly to begin with, but when you get kind of into the thought of it, I'm basically saying that I can I can stalk my prey longer than you can. I can do something better that is so simple to you, better than you can. So on a very basic level, I'm trying to get to it to understand, like, if I'm better in a very minute scale to a simple, action, how do you think I scale with every other thing that you want to do a contest with? And so those are the type of things I like to do with my dragons, that I like to go and capture, is like, hey, let's do a contest. Simple, proving a feat, show that I am better in an aspect, and they can draw the conclusion.
Very valiant point, actually. Of course, Zerai, we heard about how you managed to make your crocodile submit, but when it comes to the other two Pokemon you had, I mean, actually was a starting Pokemon that you had, so we won't cover him, of course, because starter Pokemon are always weird when it comes to how you got them. You did start with them, but what do you think? What if you had to give a viewer, this is how you should catch a dragon Pokemon, and this is how I know to do it best? How would you say it?
The way I've gone about it at this point is try to understand, like, I normally walk into a dragon's territory. It depends on where I'm walking into. Like, I've walked into one dragon's territory and been like, this is your area. That's fine, because I wasn't after that one. But if I'm walking into a dragon's territory that I'm like, I'm dead set on catching, I'm walking in with the same presence that they're holding. It's, I'm here, you better fucking pay attention to me. And, like, it depends on whether they're sentient or bestial. If they're going to attack me, I'm going to return in turn to their attack with my own. Now, a sentient one would probably be more of a conversation, even though I would probably not understand them on the same par as them. But I would probably have to go with the same thing like Briggs Grass deal, where like if they're good at being patient, I would try to be patient as well. Then again, my water typing would probably get in the way there, and I wouldn't be very patient.
That's for sure. Oh, whenever you have different personality types coming into play along with typing, it really does throw a wrench in things. I've had a couple of times where things didn't go the way I wanted, and so I completely agree with that. Another reason why I like to try and find witty ways to do contests like that, they're more safe than usual. Dragons are very ferocious, and even in a contest, even if you won the respect of the dragon, sometimes you lose, because if you lose an arm in that process, or you get severely damaged, those limbs don't grow back. And so those are the type of things where you got to be careful, because yeah, you might have beat this dragon, but what's going to happen the next time you want to catch a dragon? How much left of you is going to be actually present when it's all said and done?
When do you know when to cut your losses?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
When you're biting off too much.
Now I hate to interrupt real quick, because with that being said, I'm gonna have to turn it to this very valiant point. Zarayu, Bub, you currently in your Poke D&D, you're missing a hand. You didn't lose it from a dragon, but you are missing a hand. Are you following David's logic? Obviously, you're gonna be at a disadvantage to the next dragon you come across. What's your opinions on that?
Well, as I was going to say, when I get into the mentality, like with Crocodile, there was no mentality of I'm gonna come out of this injured. It was I'm going to make you fucking submit. I don't care what I lose in the process, but you're going to recognize me as your equal right here and now.
I personally feel like whenever you're dealing with dragons, it's a gamble. How much are you willing to gamble? Sometimes you're gonna hit blackjack, and sometimes you're gonna bust and you're gonna lose, and you're gonna lose a lot. Or sometimes you just break even.
Question is, do you have that electric type in you, Zero?
But like I said, when I went into the state with Crocodile, there was none of the gambling. It wasn't a gamble to me. It was I'm going to win this.
I think all gamblers have that mentality that they're gonna win, but not all gamblers do win.
Yeah, but a lot of the time you don't go in with the gambling mentality. That's what I'm saying. You don't look at the losses. You look at the game always.
I would say that a gambler does do that. That's the reason why they continue to gamble.
Like gambling addictions exist.
I was just saying, like, one would say it's an addiction.
I'd agree with you to a point, but I have to give it to Zarayu at this point, because even gamblers assess their losses. Otherwise, how are you able? If you're not assessing your losses, you're not much of a gambler. All you are is a man throwing money at a problem until eventually you get something that makes you feel good.
I guess I guess I'm using currency as a bad analogy for how I'm feeling about it. I feel like losing a hand is a pretty significant loss, and then it's a gamble in that regard. Whenever you're going in to have a chance of losing limbs, pretty.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I'm not qualified to speak on this because I'm not really a dragon trainer.
I'm straight, you're not. No, I'm just kidding.
Don't worry, I'll adapt to it. Monkey face. But yeah, I think probably when you're looking at it and you're talking about assessing your losses and things like that, I'm gonna have to agree with Brig, because no matter how you look at it, yeah, you're the Pokemon submitted you and you kind of done your whole hey look I'm equal to you thing, but the question really comes down to maybe it's equal, but is it really worth being its equal if you're going to lose your hand or your arm or just part of yourself every time you're going through this process. I think
That is the
Brig
ultimate question.
definitely has the right idea here when it comes to training and taming dragon types, because you have to be smart about it. You can't always go in and be like, I'm going to assert dominance. You have to be more clever so that you don't take those losses.
I wasn't saying that you go in every time with that type of dominance. I was just saying in one occasion, like if it was a dominance battle, yes. But like I said, if that's only with bestial types, but with sentient types, like I said, I agree with Brig with like different competitions or some way you can communicate on their level so they understand what you're trying to convey.
Okay, so then the question becomes...
I'd hate to stop there just so we don't pass on the Zorayu's point, then bring that up after we're done here, Jordan. With his most recent catch, his Water Dragon type. That's a pretty sentient Pokemon. It's a Seaweed, it's a Water Dragon type. It's, like I said, a little Nessie. And he called it. Not through any competition, and he called it not through any competition, but with a show of dominance. But that show of dominance wasn't even physical.
Yeah, well, but then the question becomes, we were talking about assessing your losses. Is it even worth it for most dragon trainers to go for those bestial dragons due to the risk involved?
I'd honestly, that's why, and I'll go ahead and preface this real fast with that. That's why, at least in my Poke D&D, and in my opinion in the world, it takes a special person to be a dragon trainer. Not everybody's a dragon trainer, and not everybody can have a dragon typing, and not everybody can even contemplate what's needed, what sacrifices must be had in order to gain a dragon's, not just affection, but love. Because once again, you're gaining a apex predator, you're gaining a dragon, you're gaining something that is incredibly powerful, and it is following you for some reason. And as that dragon gets older, it's not gonna... I dare anybody to try to show one sign of physical prowess over top of like a Dragon Knight or a Hadragion or even a Salamence, any of those. There's no way you can beat it in any type of physical means. And if it's not smart enough to be able to recognize your intellect, then what good is your intellectual prowess?
Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead, please.
I was going to say, one thing, and this is how I kind of treat, it's kind of helped me with my dragon training. It's actually a story that my grandfather told my father. And my family is, we're very tall, we're very slender as children, and my dad used to wrestle, because he had 4 brothers with my grandfather.
I mean, you are a tall glass of water.
Yes. And so pretty much whenever my dad would lose because he wasn't strong enough, he would always, jokingly say, like, when I'm big and strong, I'll pretty much, I'm going to put you in a headlock or whatever. And then my grandfather, very lovingly said, when you're old enough that you can, you'll know better not to. And I feel that's the way that a dragon is. It grows up and it's like, one day I'm going to beat you. And then one day it realizes and grows up and matures and is like, no, I know better not to. And that bond is very strong and very solid.
That's a good story, and I feel like that's a good analogy. Of course, that completely depends on if you're raising that dragon type from a first tier, a child.
Of
age,
course,
which,
obviously
of course,
certain things.
Well, of course, but that being said, in Poke D&D, one of the preferred methods that's pretty obviously told to people when they start off with at least a dragon type or dealing with dragon types is that the easiest time to be able to earn the respect of a dragon type, or even to be able to harness its powers and start building that friendship, is going to be at the first tier. The same way raising a child allows it to have more empathy with its parents as it gets older, same way went with a dragon, same way with animals. If it's bestial, you raise a dog from a pup, and when it gets to be, that 100-some pound Saint Bernard that could pretty much kill you if it wanted to, it's grew up with you and it's got that affection and it knows better, like in your story. Now, I find we've been having a pretty good discussion on dragon types. I need to stop it here for a second just so I can explain its weaknesses. I already explained, obviously, the weakness to a dragon type being, apex versus apex. It takes a strong motherfucker to bring down a strong motherfucker, and that's just the truth of it. But ice is the more interesting. Now, originally, the theory least with the Nintendo world of why dragons are weak to ice types is going back to yes.
Can I interject here?
Please.
I don't understand why you guys are making such a big deal over training dragon types. There's a frickin' Pixar movie about it.
God damn! You see, Vilty, this is why I want to strangle you sometimes.
And this is why he's
like,
guilty to fighting types. A punch to the
Guilty.
face always makes guilty go away.
oh my god!
Ice
Oh,
Club.
also, I figured I'd also
Ice Club.
I'll say
Ice Club.
this. Brig is fighting steel type primary for anybody who wouldn't know by this point, which would probably be the majority of you, since this is one of the first times he's actually came up in these conversations of ours. But that being said, the weakness to ice type, I mean, it can date back all the way to the fact that Nintendo usually mentioned dragons, and Nintendo being based in Asian culture, a lot of Asian cultures view dinosaurs as being dragons, and so they made the ice type super effective to them, because at the time when the typings were being laid out, the primary ideal was that dragons were killed by the Ice Age. And so the dragons being dinosaurs killed by the Ice Age, dragons are weak to ice, they did that. Now, of course, I also put in that it doesn't matter how big you are, if you're in an icy area and you're not used to the ice, you'll eventually freeze to death, and that's true of about anything. But when it comes to something that large, that's about one of its only weaknesses left. And so it's prefaced as, hey, this is its weakness. Not only is dragon's weakness, but ice. When it comes to personality-wise, though, the fragility of an ice type, which is what we're going to go on to talk about next here in a second, ice types being the most fragile out of all the typings, only second only to flying types, which we covered in a previous video. You put something that fragile up against a dragon, and the dragon, like Zariah was talking about earlier, they're not mindless killing machines, of course, unless you've got those weird type of dragons, like you got that Hydragion that wants nothing more than destruction and death among all other things. You put it in front of something that fragile that it knows cannot compete against it. It's not going to fight at its top. It's not going to fight at its top power, and even if it does, it's not going to attempt to really destroy it, because it's looking at something it views as lesser. And when it looks at something it views lesser, it's not going to want to kill it, because where is the honor in that? Dragon types are not notoriously honor bound, but that being said, there's just no reason. It's just it's unsuiting. It's unmerciful. That mercy Zariah was talking about the dragons can give, this is the example of it. That's why they're weak to ice types on a personality basis. All right. Now, talking about ice types, we're going to go ahead and we're going to transition into the ice types.
I
Yes, go
quickly
ahead.
ask one thing about dragon types.
Go ahead.
Probably a stupid question, but are dragon types warm or cold-blooded?
It depends.
Well, like for example, like a Slagton, which is a made-up dragon type, is a fire steel dragon,
Yeah.
and he's molten metal. So I would dare say that he's a little bit on the warmer side.
Well,
Nah.
the point being is, I mean, they resemble, big lizards, basically. So, I mean,
Of course.
I can see
That's
where you're
one
going,
level,
basically
yeah.
saying that the harder they fight, the more blood they pump. Therefore, they're exerting more energy, and ultimately they just get cold-blooded, lethargic,
Yeah.
can't even fight.
Oh yeah, I could definitely see that point of being, and my argument would be that they're neither warm nor blooded. Being a dragon type doesn't mean you're going to be cold or warm blooded. It depends on the dragon specifically, rather than the typing as a whole. Nintendo based its typing system around popular knowledge when they did so, and so we have to look within inside that world to be able to understand it. And that's why I would argue, I'd say a lot of dragon types being more reptilian looking would be cold-blooded, honestly, like a
that's one of the
salamence, things of that
reasons,
nature.
I'm trying to say that could be one of the physical reasons for their weakness
To the
ice
cold.
types and colder types and stuff like that.
I would strongly believe that would be another good reason why ice type would be effective against them too. Great point, Denise. All right, so
God damn it, Jordan.
of course. Now that being said, let's go ahead now. When we talk about ice types, I've got Team Ice Club here, the only two ice type people that are in a Poke D&D, that being Chris and Vilty. Chris being Flying Ice, and Vilty being Ice Psychic, if I'm correct. Technically Ice Psychic Dark, considering the percentages on his primary, secondary, and tertiary are within reason to give him 3 typings.
Mostly because he's an asshole.
Hey,
You don't mess with our ice club.
God damn it.
Not much of a club.
Rule 1
it's
about
two
Ice
people.
Club, you don't talk about Ice Club. Rule 2 about Ice Club, you don't talk about Ice Club.
Because
Rick,
it's
we
a
don't
bit
need more
awkward
people.
and
We can make
it's-
ice decoys.
It's kind of awkward
Yeah.
We
and
can
no
build
one
a
really wants to
snowman.
talk about it.
Wanna
and,
build a snowman?
Oh, Christ,
God.
you guys.
They come in
All
giant.
right. So we're gonna go ahead. A little background information on ice types. Once again, as we always do, before we go into the discussion, ass types. I should call
Wait,
them ass
as
types.
to what? Excuse me?
Ask the type, you never go ask the type.
Ironically, I
weird.
think the ass types would be quite hot.
Oh my God, Jordan, you
You're welcome.
lesbian.
You love it, Joe.
Anyways, you know I do, Denise. Anyways, so a little background information on ice types. Ice types, like I mentioned earlier, they're very fragile, as you imagine ice would be. Now, that being said, just as there are many types of ice, you've got black ice, cloudy ice, clear ice, you've got the ice that makes up icebergs, you've got the ice that forms in the ground as permafrost. You have a multitude of different forms of ice. It's the same as there are multitudes of different forms of fragility that each ice type has. Now, that being said, you look at an ice type and you go, okay, they're fragile. They're kind of cold, honestly. They're not going to really form very good social attachments. With the social attachments they form, they'll probably be fragile within that social attachment. But how do they fight? How do they offensively go at things? Because not everything's defensive, and you can't just look at the defensive manner. Well, look at ice-type moves for a good reference. Ice-type moves have pretty decent power. Not only that, but most ice-type moves have the the ability to cause a secondary effect, frozen. If an ice-type Pokemon can hit strong and freeze that opponent, what better way to avoid being shattered? And look at that and you go, well, let's take that into their personalities. An ice-type, when they hit hard, they hit fast, and they hit enough to freeze the target. When I freeze it, I mean they stun it. They lock you down, and that person goes, you kind of say to yourself, damn, that's cold. No pun intended, but that's the truth of it. So,
Kind of glass cannon-y, you know?
that's the exact reference I was about ready to make. They're very glass cannon-y. They're an ice cannon, which is a great way you can look at most ice-type Pokemon, outside of some of the newer ones that are meant to be tanks. But, of course, that's with the Pokemon game trying to balance itself as a game, not as a playable world. Alright, so...
These are pretty tanky, Tom.
Well, not entirely, because...
Said Avalugg.
Yeah, Avalugg is an iceberg, and as much as you try, you can't really shatter an iceberg.
Yeah, but
Easily.
the one thing that's nice about an iceberg is that you stick it in a hot sunny day, that thing's gonna melt. May take a little while, but it's guaranteed to melt. And how annoying is it, that stupid temperature increase? You're still
Until you
fragile.
freeze all the temperature around you.
Well, that's why I said discounting some of the newer ones that Nintendo put out.
Also,
But that's
I'm
not
gonna
the
throw
point.
it there. If I have 100 men with ice specs, I'm gonna say I can fucking shatter you, son. I don't care how iceberg you are, you can. I
I
think,
would say ice
I
doesn't
mean,
bother me. I'm fighting
look,
steel, so
look, here's the
it's
thing.
completely good.
if I have enough men, enough pickaxes, or enough dynamite, I'm gonna shatter you. There's no two ways about it.
Alright, so something else I want to mention before we start this conversation with Ice Club here is that just like ice can be clear or cloudy, an ice type's personality or even an ice type's intentions may not be always the most obvious thing. You can look at them and go, okay, they're ice, this is what they're going to do, but you can't see what the ice is hiding. This is the same way that black ice can be incredibly dangerous when you're driving on the road, is the same way cloudy ice might hide the fact that behind that ice is a rock, behind that ice is nothing. You don't know, and so it preserves a bit of mystery as a form of defense. Which,
Frozen, mummified body.
I mean, exactly, who knows? It might be an ancient alien tomb that long ago the Mayans used to use to sacrifice humans to resurrect aliens, and the predators came down and tried to kill them. Not saying that's what happens, just saying. So
Well,
we're going to go
indeed.
ahead. We're going to go ahead with that, and we're going to kind of bring in Team Ice Club here. Starting with Chris. Now, Chris, you seem to be like you're anxious for some damn reason. I don't know what it is. So please to God, tell me about it.
Anxious, explain what you mean by that.
I don't know. I've just been seeing your hand up, so I have to point at you.
Oh, I was just saying, like, commonly, like, Arthas in World of Warcraft would be ice, other than the fact that he lives in ice. But his motives were really cloudy, because all he wanted to do was protect his people, so he followed the demons and became the Lich King, but then he got corrupted.
That's actually a pretty good example. Kudos to you, Chris. Actually, Arthas is a good example of an ice type. The fragility of his psyche. You know, he killed his father, things of that nature. But at the same time, his motives being set, cold, obvious, as in the ice type that you can be. Now, with
Per
that
Meriden.
being, oh god damn it, Meriden.
Per Meriden.
Poor Meriden. All right, so now Vilty, you have been around since the first Poke D&D. You've been an ice type since then. What are some things you've learned for me? You have a pretty good handle on it. You have a pretty good handle on both ice and psychic. That being said, so talk to me. And if I swear to God, if you start with Ting Ting, I'm gonna murder you.
Oh.
Ting Tong.
Yes. Oh my God. See,
One
this
thing I've
is why
noticed is
grass
he's
is weak to
fragile.
ice.
It's like bubble.
Oh God, so please, Vilty, enlighten us. Tell us some of your knowledge you've gained from dealing with ice types.
Ice types, for the most part, when, you think about why most people catch a Pokemon is to really have a friend, ice types, aren't necessarily looking for a friend beyond the fact that it's, kind of a mutual benefit to not look like an absolute fucking loner, but...
I'm sorry. I kind of enjoy that appearance, but
If you
Well,
enjoyed
there
that
you go.
appearance,
That's
you
your
would be a nice
flying
boy.
typing come into play. You like to flock with birds.
But yeah, ice types don't necessarily need as much companionship as almost any other, Pokemon. It's just, and even as a trainer, I realize that I can't even split my attention between multiple because, well,
Well, I mean that you've had that problem quite a bit actually. You started with quite a few grass types, as ironic as that is, and with that being said, you've only ever had one grass type that really kind of loved you, and that was the one time you paid attention to that grass type instead of some other Pokemon. Vilty, just because I want to talk about this story because it needs to be talked about. Why don't you tell us about the time that your grass Pokemon sold you out so you would die?
Good times. One of my favorite times.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Great
I
one.
mean, I already talked about it a little bit when we covered grass types, but
Oh, I know. Just refresh my memory because I love hearing about it.
well, had Snivy, and well, I mean, I treat it as much as I treat pretty much any of my other Pokemon. I make sure they're fed. I make sure they get, when I'm addressing everybody, I make sure they get addressed. So, but I mean, for the most part, whenever I didn't completely pay attention to it, as I did my most favorite Pokemon in that frickin' campaign. So, eventually, I was trapped in a dinosaur-infested pit on my escape attempt.
As you do.
It's at some point the Snivy got away from me and alerted frickin' ice grass.
This crazy motherfucker, right?
Yeah, pretty much. This crazy mother. God damn it, Vilty. I just got reminded of why I never asked you to tell stories because you're horrible at it.
Yeah.
God bless it.
And in short,
I'm
Bilty
really
was
good at the details.
Oh, God.
One would say he's cold.
I think it's safe
That's
to
a great
say,
one.
in short, his Pokemon sold him out, so he could be horrifically murdered and dismembered limb by limb
Yep.
one at a time.
That's
Also-
appropriate.
Safe to say, probably my favorite death I've ever ridden the back of in Poke D&D to join the campaign. Definitely could get behind that, yeah.
Yeah, it was a good death. It was a really good death.
How many times has Vilty died in the campaign, honestly?
Once per campaign, probably.
I don't have my book in front of me, so I couldn't tell you. Well, not that I don't have my book in front of me. I don't have that page open, and I don't really feel like turning to
There's a
dead counts
tally
tonight.
mark under Vilty's name. He's like, whoop, another tally mark.
Well, better go ahead and
Realistically,
write
I haven't
this
died
in.
as many as some people, so
Don't worry, I'll put my hand up.
You know what they
And I'll
say about
say-
second place, Vilty? It's the first
And
loser.
it's definitely not second place either.
Look,
Oh, God.
I'll put my hand up and say I've died a whole lot of times,
Yeah, I've
but
died 100% of all my D&Ds.
All right.
every time
Now-
I have done it in a good way.
I can confirm that I haven't died in 100% of my D&Ds, so there you go.
That is true. All right, so I'm gonna interrupt it for a second just so I can talk about their weaknesses, and then we'll probably give some tips to training ice types, and then we'll move on from there. Ice has 4 weaknesses generally. They have fire, fighting, rock, and steel. Now, fighting is pretty damn obvious. You punch a piece of ice, it's gonna break. If it's hard, you just need to punch harder. I mean, you can't really argue against that. With fighting type mentalities, you'll be able to see the differences when we cover them next, which is, of course, why these 3 are in this group together. Fire, once again, the physical reasons why it's weak to it. You heat up ice, it melts, it's done for. Personality-wise, they're cold. Kind of a little bit heartless, honestly, which I don't mean to be offensive, but it's just kind of true. They're a little bit heartless, a little bit disattached from people. You meet somebody with that burning passion in their stomach, that person that has some type of passion for life, maybe, for something, but at least they seem dedicated to something. That can get underneath an ice type skin pretty horrifically, and when that gets underneath your skin, it can start to mess with you mentally, and next thing you know, you're starting to just focus and fixate on that, which is the same thing mentally as being weak to that type of personality. What's that, Jordan?
I think it's safe to say the ice type is that person who you go over to them, right, Tom? Say, you go over to them, you're like, guys, going to make a YouTube channel. It's going to be great. It'll be fantastic. An ice type person will be the person who goes, well, I just hope you know what your daily upload limit will be, because let me tell you, you won't be hitting it.
That's a pretty good one. Another example of an ice type, if say a person was trying to make a YouTube channel and he was trying to record a video, an ice type personality
User in
might
your channel
set-
timed out.
Would time
might
out.
sit there. Yeah, he might time out. That's, oh my God, please Jesus, make one of
That
those.
was-
Oh God, that would have been so good. Anyways, that type of person might, ping horrifically before the beginning of the episode, and then during it, answer it with a ting ting. That might be a nice type personality. Of course, that's just my own theory.
So
course.
back speak from personal
Is this from
experience there, my
experience?
friend.
No, not at all. Not at all. This
No,
is
this is all
These are just
theoreticals,
completely
obviously.
off the wall, like
Theory
ideas,
craft?
Like, these aren't real world examples or anything.
Yeah,
Of course.
I'm sorry to derail you, Tom.
Oh, it's God damn it. Anyways, so we understand fire. We're going to look at rock and steel now. Once again, ice types have a horrific amount of weaknesses, which kind of rejustifies the fragility of them. Rock, physiological reasons why you throw a rock at a piece of ice. Same thing as punching it with a fist. It's most likely going to break. Personality-wise, once again, rock types are fragile too, but not fragile as ice. So if an ice type can manage to make a rock shatter, well,
Realistically,
they're gonna
rock-
shatter
ice is
backwards,
pretty
and a
good at
rock
that.
shattering is much more damaging to the ice than it is to the rock.
Realistically, ice is actually pretty good at making rocks, break in real world.
With fracture lines and things of that nature. But
Yeah.
you break a rock in half, what do you have? You have 2
A
rocks.
rock.
You break it ice in half, what do you have? A bunch of bitty pieces of ice that you might as well sweep off the porch.
But Tom, why do you have half a rock? That's the real question.
Oh God, I guess you have
Rocks
half a
don't really
rock when a
crumble.
rock breaks, unless that rock broke before you knew it. Then you just got 2 rocks.
To be
I would
fair,
say
Tom,
really rocks break into like larger pieces. I mean, now I'm going to talk about my childhood. I was one of those kids that saw on the Discovery Channel Geode. I'm like, oh, I just need to break rocks open all day, and I'll find a geode at one point. Well, I was horribly mistaken 6 hours later. But
Exactly.
realistically, I could smash that rock against a rock all day, and it took a lot of extreme pressure. And it usually would only, and if it shattered, quote unquote, it was only like 4 or 5 major pieces. Ice, you shatter ice, it's pulverized.
Yeah.
It is absolute. I mean, it is turning into water faster than you can count how many pieces of ice it shattered into.
True.
I think
Tom,
Yes.
to be fair though, rock has more weaknesses than us.
Yeah.
Ah, God, yes, you're right. You see, once again, ice type mentalities. All right, so we go to steel then. of course, well, hold on. Let me finish talking about rock. With
Sure.
at least comes to the personality complex. Once again, they're strong. They're patient, just like their ground counterparts, but they actually have the ability to shatter a bit easier. Ice goes against it. Ice can shatter it. You have 2 rocks now. You have multiple rocks. They keep doing it. Doesn't matter. No matter how much the ice type wants to try to deal with that, they can freeze a rock in ice. It's still a rock, and you mean to tell me rock bound by ice isn't worse than rock bound by other rock? Not true. So you look at that's why the personality comes out. That patient person who's going to shatter out underneath extreme pressure is going to be able to take a lot of that damage from the ice type, and when it suddenly shatters, that ice type is not going to be prepared, at least personally, to deal with the vengeance of a shattered rock. For example, an explosion would probably be a good example of this. That rock type explodes, that ice is going down with it at least. So we'll go to steel types now. Now, steel types have a special place in my heart, but of
Wait,
course,
steel or fighting?
Steel and the weaknesses. We're not to the steel typing yet in the video. The weakness to steel is just pretty much what you'd expect. Steel takes very, very, very cold environments to at least become, fragile. And so you're not going to have to worry about it physiologically getting to that point. By that point, you're putting trainers in danger. And if you're doing that, you're putting yourself in danger along with the other opponent. And that's just something you don't see a lot happening in PokeDDs outside of like your maniacal evil motherfucker. Which, I mean, if you're being maniacal and evil, there you go, sheer cold. And if you're doing that, well then, I mean, you've got more problems than just your steel type weakness. Now the personality goes, we would have talked about steel types before in this video, so of course check out the other videos to learn more about them. But steel types themselves can be very resilient, and by that I mean they form to be the best in something. And so when an ice type comes at them and they're like, I attack like this, the steel type changes to be better against that. And the ice type being fragile, it can't just change how it is. Ice types don't really change. They just make it cloudy for you to see who they are. And so the steel type changes to not complement, to be adverse to the ice type's attack. There you go, personality-wise. The steel type is now not immune, but resistant to that ice type bullshit. And you can see it a lot when it comes to those people that are kind of steeled. When I say steeled, they're hardened. You look at him, you go, that's a person who's been through some shit. He's been forged in the world. He can deal with a bunch of bullshit and come out on top. You put him against that fragile ice type. You put him against that person who's trying to do a bunch of bullshit. Let's example, like annoying them or something like that. Maybe perhaps he's trying to misdirect you. The steel type isn't going to give a shit. The steel type's resistant to it, and that's where you can see that steel type difference coming out in the personality. And we already talked about the physical reasons why a steel type is going to be resistant to ice. Now, any training tips you guys would give before we go on to fighting, which is, of course, Briggs' primary typing, so we can expect a pretty heavy conversation from that.
I wouldn't know anything of the sort.
Just to throw it out there, for people who might want to visualize what we just spoke about, basically, it's a 14-year-old trying to convince a Vietnam veteran that chinos are cool. That's basically what that would be.
You got a good point. You have a really good point. Oh.
Like, he's just sitting there staring at him like,
I'm done with your shit.
But Jordan, they are really cool.
Hey, this is why I want to stab you sometimes.
Guilty.
Huh?
You are holding the weight of Ice Club on your shoulders.
So,
Stop.
what is your training tips? Tell us. Speak.
I don't
into the
have much
masses.
experience in this, so it's all Vilty.
I don't train Pokemon generally.
Fantastic, good tips.
Dog.
Very on the lot here.
So
Oh,
way to not
God.
fail, train Pokemon.
Oh God, I'm glad we asked that. Well then, I guess I'll go ahead and speak on it then. When training an ice type, it's usually good to recognize their weaknesses first. Of course, their fragility is one of their main points, so recognizing that weakness is a pretty good place to start. After that, you want to go ahead and you want to understand they're not going to be too incredibly dependent on your social interactions, so probably having some type of deeper understanding with them would probably be the better point to form a relationship with them. When I'm saying that, I'm not saying, you need to sit there underneath a campfire and tell ghost stories or talk about your life to them, because they probably won't give a shit.
That's right.
All right. So, oh my God. So when it comes to actually forming that relationship, that's probably the best way you want to go with them.
User
You want to
joined your
build some
channel.
type of relationship. All right. So besides that, when it comes to actually training them as a Pokemon, what you want to do is you want to go ahead and you want to say, I need to fight this Pokemon. I need to understand how to deal with this type of Pokemon. I need to deal with this type of effect. How do I need to deal with that? Hit strong, freeze the target. We already talked about that's how they want to fight. That's a great way of handling the problem. That's how you should come and deal with it. Alright, so I feel pretty alright, honestly, about dealing with ice types that way. I feel like that's a pretty, at least decent explanation for what we have.
I would agree. I understand why they shatter when I hit them now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's.
Do
I
you
think
though,
it's
Brig?
safe to say.
I will fly away.
I think
Why
it's.
don't I shatter though?
Look,
Why
I
don't I shatter?
think it's safe to say at this point we're going to handle ice types how ice types handle social situations, half-heartedly, and we don't really care.
Ting ting.
Let's move to fight. Shall we, Tom?
Yes. Alright, so
Fuck
It's
that.
fighting time now.
God bless it. Alright, now there's only one fighting type person that I've ever met, at least in this TeamSpeak, and one that's ever participated in Poke D&Ds, and of course that's Brig. Now, Brig's primary fighting type above all other things too, which means he is probably the go-to person when it comes to naturally finding a kinment with this typing. Now, before I go ahead and set him loose, because by this point, you probably should be able to realize that Brig's a man of many words.
Yes,
We're
he
going to
doesn't
go ahead
believe.
and give a little background information about fighting types. Fighting types are all about self-improvement, but they're not opposed to losing. You see, a fighting type can lose and lose and lose and lose, and he can never win a battle in his life, but a fighting type is never discouraged by it. A fighting type improves and he improves. He takes every loss with a grain of salt and he goes, I understand how I got weaker. I understand why I'm weaker than my opponent, and I'll work to better myself through it. Most of the time, a fighting type works better when they have a cause to fight for. For example, a funny thing as it is, a great example of a fighting type is Buddha. A lot of people find this kind of hard to grasp, but follow me through it and you'll understand. First of all, of course, you have to believe that Buddha was an actual person, so just take that with me and we'll move on from there. Buddha was a man, he was a prince, he went about his life and he saw the weakness in the world and he saw the weakness in himself. And so what did he seek out to do? He sought to improve himself. He was battered, he was put down, he was not the best person, and he lost quite a few times, but he sought to improve himself and he kept trying to improve himself until eventually he finally won. And when he won with indiscriminate truth. Now, when I say that, I don't mean fighting types are incredibly honest. I'm just talking about he won with his fist, and in his manner, his fist was truth to himself. It was the truth of who he was. So understanding that and being like, okay, I can understand that, but what about all this cause shit, right? He fought with a cause. He fought with the cause of self-enlightenment and truth to the world. And when he fought with that weight on his shoulders, he was able to fight better and he was able to fight harder. And that's something that you can kind of go, okay, if that's how fighting types are, how am I going to experience them in my life? Well, you might know some people in your lives that might be down. For example, they might be in the poverty line. They might not have everything going for them. They might have to work 2 jobs just to stay afloat. They might be working 2 jobs and going to college right now. You don't know, but they have a hard life. But that person always keeps fighting. Are they winning in their life? No, obviously not. If they were winning in their life, they wouldn't have to put themselves through so much strain to be able to do that. But that doesn't mean they've gave up, and that doesn't mean they're going to quit. And what cause do they have? That cause might be their own cause, but it's still a cause nonetheless. And that's where you see the strength of a fighting type. They fight to win, and they fight for their cause. And because they fight for their cause, they do not give up. And when you have an opponent that doesn't give up and just keeps improving time after time, that's when you truly understand the personality of fighting type. Now, you look at that and you go, okay, look at Maw Chokes, Maw Champs, or rather, Maw Chops, Maw Chokes, and Maw Champs. You can see the evolution of this type of fighting mentality. It starts off, this little guy is usually in caves. He's karate chopping shit. He's working on his strength. He's put himself in a situation to where he is going to have to fight every day in order to increase his own abilities. Now, sure, he's effective against rocks, but that's not the point. He's trying to harden himself. You get to a Maw Choke, he's hardened himself now. He's gotten stronger, better, faster. Millennial men type of mentality. He keeps working, but he can't really get stronger now because look at his body. He's at the apex of a humanoid body. What else can he do? How else can he improve himself? Look at then Maw Champ. Give that man another set of arms. That's the only way you could have improved past that point without becoming encumbersome with your own body. That's an example I like to use when you're looking at fighting type self-improving through an evolutionary standpoint. And I find it pretty resilient in the honest nature of it. Now, that being said, Brig.
Yes, sir.
Your primary fighting type, and in your own personal D&D, because you have a pretty hard time dealing with the time differences. You're located halfway across the continent from us, not halfway fully across the continent from us, so you can't be a part of everything. But you actually in that world have 2 fighting type Pokemon, and those 2 fighting type Pokemon love you to death. I mean, obviously you've been through thick and thin with them. They've been beside you all your life. What type of understandings have you gained from them? What type of knowledge has your Pokemon kind of gave to you through this experience of yours?
Wow, it's a good question. It's very broad, which it gives me a lot of room to talk about it. But I guess I don't know where to really start. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. That's one thing for sure that I can attest to as my personality-wise, is that I definitely want to better myself. It's actually why I really enjoy fighting types, that endless amount of practice. And even though, defeat can be discouraging, it makes you fired up for that next contest. You're like, okay, well, I'm ready to do this again. And it I don't know, it comes out back as a fuel. And role playing with these Pokemon have really made me kind of draw analogies to real world problems and have a better attitude on life. When things are tough, just the tough get going, and when you get going, sooner or later you're going to get somewhere where you want to be. And so I have a variation form of a evolved Riolu, which is instead of a Lucario, which is fighting steel, I have a Jucario, which is a little bit made up, which is just a pure fighting type. And that whole discipline that he's been, I'm starting to learn about self-improvement and just the idea about how you perceive the world around you. And it's really just been fun, as the best way I can put it. I really do enjoy going up against an opponent, and sometimes that actually messes with them. It's like, well, I'm defeated, I'm dirty, I'm bloody, and you just get back up, and they're like, okay, I've done this to him, I've beaten the crap out of him, why why is he still going? And sometimes that can really unnerve an opponent. They're like, I don't know what to do. I've literally beaten him to a pulp, and he's still coming at me. Obviously, you can keep trying to fight, but that's kind of the realm where fighting type is, good. They won't give up until they can't move.
Very, very nicely said. I appreciate, once again, you being here, because, once again, you are the only fighting type person in the channel, so if anybody's going to be able to give us any type of insight, it would be you. Now, I'll go ahead and pause you for a second just so we can talk about its weaknesses a bit. When it comes to the weaknesses of a fighting type, once again, we're not counting Gen 6, so no fairy type, sorry about it, but don't have enough information to really bring it up. It only has 2 weaknesses, and those 2 weaknesses being flying and psychic. Now, flying, it's pretty physically, if you think about it, it can do you a lot of good to punch and kick and all that, but flying types have pretty good agility, just because when your only thing holding you down is the ability of you to ride on air, you can dodge pretty easily, especially when the fact that they can attack from almost every angle. Being a flying type, you're not bound by gravity. You can hit multiple weaknesses in your opponent. Now, psychic types are a little bit more interesting. We talked about them on the inaugural episode, so thankfully we'll have a beautiful, beautiful rendition of them by the time you get to this point. Psychic types, it's pretty much the difference between brain and brawn, only in this time, brains wins out against bronze, because a fighting type can go in with his training, and he knows how to deal with these different occurrences, and how to best counter something, how the best to start the fight, how the best to end the fight. But you go up against somebody who just levitates you into midair, or somebody who's able to make a physical barrier in front of you. I mean, of course, you've got fighting moves like Brick Break, but that speaks more to the self-improvement of fighting types against their weakness psychics rather than their weakness to psychic types. You go up against somebody who has that type of mental foresight and forethought into a fighting scenario, and the fighting type just isn't going to win. And it's the sadness, but it's the truth. You just can't fight something that can control the arena that you're fighting in. I mean, you may be able to beat them through enough determinants and things of that manner, but it's just not going to happen. And at least that's the physical side points of it. When it comes to the mental points of it, or at least the personality points of it, flying types are that awkward person. Obviously, they're not trying to be annoying. They're not trying to be aggressive. They're not trying to be anything but who they are. And a fighting type sees that and he goes, that's not really an opponent. How can I fight something like that when it's not deserving of it? They don't know any better, and I can't pick a fight with something like that. That's not the right thing to do. That's not who I am. Of course, we're taking generalized personalities here. And so the fighting type isn't going to try to fight them. It's going to try to reason with them, and by the time you're doing that, that flying type is already making the first move. And when you come to that understanding, you say, okay, I can see kind of the weakness when you deal with something like that. Now, the mental point of view when it comes to psychic versus fighting, the arrogance, the I'm over you psychic mentality, the I'm better than you, I know I'm better than you, I'm smarter than you, I can think better than you. I before we came into this conversation, I already picked what I was going to say to you. And that's just the truth. And when you have that person go to talk to the fighting type, they might as well be putty in their hands. That person's going in earnest. He's going in with the thought of an earnest fight occurring. And that psychic type's going into being like, I know how to deal with this person. I know how to deal with this conversation. You're not gonna be an equal footing, and that psychic type's gonna know where that conversation's gonna go. Where the fighting type thinks, oh, everything's going great, everything seems to be fine. So you can kind of understand the failures of the fighting type, at least against the psychic type, in that manner. All right. So yeah, go ahead.
One thing I wanted to comment that I found, when I did fight a psychic type trainer, is that I think the psychic type realizes its weaknesses more fully than the fighting type, and because they are so aware of that, because you can look at a lot of psychic Pokemon, and their physical strength is not even comparable. I mean, they obviously use their mind, which means that in a reverse way, the best way to beat a psychic trainer is to not let him use psychic abilities, because you punch him, he goes down. So with that same logic, they're like, well, don't let the fighting Pokemon be able to move. You can't move, you can't punch. What is that Pokemon at that point? He has nothing special about him.
I think it's safe to say along those lines as well. I mean, you're saying about how, what gives a psychic type advantage is, you're saying, it has full realization of its own disabilities or its own weaknesses. I think something that a psychic type can do a lot better than a fighting type is, not just see its weaknesses, but very easily identify the weaknesses of its opponent.
Right, most definitely. I would completely agree with that.
Yeah, that's a good thing to say.
I actually think, I'm actually going to disagree with you. I actually think it's harder for a psychic type to see its own weaknesses purely because of its,
Hubris.
superiority complex, I think a psychic type is going to be like, hey, he's going to be like, oh, if he really does have this, superiority complex, like, I'm perfect, I just have to do this, you're done. Do you know what I mean?
I see what you're saying. He's not really encompassing his weaknesses and like trying to cover them up. More of he's exploiting the weaknesses of his target before they can really analyze their own target and manipulate their weaknesses.
Yeah, there they're looking at your weaknesses so that they don't have to look at their own. It's a very basic thing, when it comes to superiority complexes like that. If you can focus on, the troubles that someone else has or the problems of someone else, you can ignore your own.
Well, it's true. Even in a fight, I'm more concerned about getting out of my problem than figuring out what's good against him, and that's completely what he wants me to be thinking.
True. That's an excellent point there, Jordan. Why am I calling you Jordan? Forgive me, Denise. That's an excellent point, Denise.
Call you
You're
DJ for short.
I'm never gonna call you anything else but that now. You know better. And of course, Brig, once again, beautiful explanations there. So we'll go ahead and any training tips that you would give for aspiring young fighting types out there.
Punch that dragon in the face.
I mean,
over. We can end the episode
simple.
there.
But yeah, the most simple, and there's a difference between hearing what needs to be done and doing it. You can hear, don't give up, and people are like, oh yeah, I never give up. But do you really not give up? Do you actually fervently believe that if I continue that I will succeed? And that's that belief you gotta have. You gotta look, at your losses and say that don't worry, this will be riches. It just takes time. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And you believing that internally, your Pokemon will pick up on that, and that'll create a bond. You'll then train harder. You'll then accelerate your growth, and then sooner or later, you're going to have a tragic story where you go into arena thinking that you're having a hard battle, and then you end up cracking a Squirtle shell, and then him having to be rushed off to a Pokemon Center. So, you can see your leaps and bounds from there.
So, what in layman's terms, what you're trying to tell me is there's a difference between knowing the path and walking.
The path. I was hoping you'd pick up on that so bad. I'm so happy right now.
Oh God! All right. Well, with that, oh God, I don't think we can talk anymore about fighting types, at least, and not give you guys some unneeded headway. All right, so. I feel like we covered fighting type well too. There, everybody. Would you agree, Brig?
I would definitely agree, and I actually enjoyed myself, and I really appreciate everybody coming out. Let me come out here and talk about my typing.
I'm glad you appreciated it. Yes, Denise.
It's okay, because we here appreciate you coming out to talk to us about it.
Oh well,
now that
that's
I've
wonderful.
been nice in this video, I'm going to be a nice trigger and say, we didn't really have to talk about it anyway. Everyone knows it.
Thank God we can get that out of the way. All right, well, with that, I've been here with Jordan.
Punch that dragon in the face.
I've been here with Brigadoon.
Have a good one, guys.
Chris.
Ting ting.
God damn it, Vilty.
Hey, how you doing?
Oh God, I thought you were gonna go ting ting too. I was so anxious.
Ting ting 3.
Oh God, and Zarayu.
Have a good one. Sorry about the disconnect.
God, I was hoping
it's
Zarayu was
fine.
going to do it so bad.
Oh God, you see, that's why me and Zarayu can be friends, Vilty, because he knows better.
I've been sitting here with my face in my hands. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's fine. And of course, I'm your host, DM Tom. We'll see you next time.
Tom Ting Ting Tucker.
And don't forget, no one likes ice types, really.